help make your school schedules promote gap closing. My background is in STEM and education. I've been a math teacher, science teacher, social studies teacher, a reading teacher. I've also been a principal of high school and middle school. I've been a curriculum director, and I've also been assistant superintendent. So I've been around the block, as you can tell if you're looking at me, but I hope to be able to both help you and to elicit some help from each of you for each other as we go along in this particular webinar. Don't forget to unmute your mic when you're speaking. This will be pretty interactive. We had, I think, 20-something people sign up, so we'll just keep monitoring how we're doing with regard to sound. If anything is unclear, don't hesitate to jump in, and if you'd like to use the chat feature, I'll keep monitoring that as we go along. So to get started, if we could hear a little bit from each of the participants who are on already, that way we can have for the record the people who came, and then I can send a certificate to you at the end that indicates your participation if you need it. So with that in mind, how about we start with one of you?
My name is Rhonda Calhoun. I am a 25-year educator with a background being a principal, a counselor, a business education teacher. I have supervised teams, data, done scheduling, what I call a group of students that fall into this category are exceptional students, which include ESL, special ed, gifted and talented, 504 students. And I am interested in just seeing how creating schedules can be done to close these achievement gaps that exist in public schools today.
Thank you, Rhonda. That was awesome. Rick?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm Rick Longoria. I'm the counselor at the Colorado River Collegiate Academy. This is my third year counseling here. We don't have any seniors. We started off my first year here with freshmen. And we kind of have a 4-year plan. Scheduling is a bit difficult because each student has to be scheduled with 18 courses because we're in a block schedule and very different here. Anyway, I'm interested in finding out how others are doing and what could be easier or what could help overall.
Thanks, Rick. That was good. That was great. We tried really hard to make sure that we meet your needs. If we could have another participant. So unfortunately, I sent out the link to mine, and so there's a whole bunch of me on the call. So if you guys wouldn't mind just jumping in and identifying yourself, that would be great.
No, someone's trying to talk, but I think you have to unmute the mic.
Well, as we go along, I'll, Maggie, are you able to talk?
I don't know if she can. She is our, this is Rick Longoria, the Colorado River Collegiate Academy. She is our college access specialist, and she is at the community college right now with our students. She wanted to do this webinar as well, you know, because she and I work together.
Great, thanks. Maybe she'll log in when she's done with the kids.
Mm-hmm. She's logged in. I don't think she has. I don't know if she has it. If she's able to talk.
Okay. Has anybody else logged in that hasn't identified themselves?
Finish with the exponsive first.
Well, we'll go ahead and get started. If you have questions as we go along, please don't hesitate to ask them. I thought I'd start out with a little bit of information for you in an analogy. Grading policies are to teachers as the master schedule is to a school. Well, what we look at when we look at a master schedule, we look at it like teachers look at their grading policies. So these are rigid, these are finite, these are things that people think can't be changed. That's not necessarily true. And so although the analogy would resonate with many people, it isn't necessarily true that these things are so rigid that they can't be changed. What I found so I was, a little background, I started out teaching in a comprehensive high school in an urban area, Columbus, Ohio, and went to the design process of starting a STEM school that's now 15 years old. And then once I was in a STEM school, then people said, oh, you can do these kinds of things because you have a specialty school that is separate from everybody else, you know, and it's an early college, so it's just different. So, but we can't do this in our regular high schools. So I went back to the regular high school to figure out how to get it done, and was successful in that. What I found was that the fixed mindset is sometimes in our way when we look at doing schedules. So what I hope to do over the course of the next hour or so is to talk about some ways that you can counter the fixed mindset and maybe think a little bit differently about how you do your schedules. So when I look at scheduling, it's a constant iteration or a design cycle. You try to make sure that in really good scheduling processes, you empathize with what does the day feel like, sound like, and look like for the student. What does it look like, feel like, and sound like for the teacher, and what does it look like, feel like, and sound like for the community? That empathy component is necessary for you to be able to have a responsive schedule. And responsive schedules are schedules that are more likely to be able to close gaps for students. When we look at closing gaps for students, and we define what it is that we want to get from our schedule, the next step, of course, is defining the problem. We want to make sure that we use data to be able to verify that it is actually a problem, and to use the information that we gathered during the empathy stage to make sure that we don't do something that would be counter to what we want for our students. Ideating is where we brainstorm and figure out what could happen, what could we do. Prototyping, of course, is designing something that would serve the solution ideas, and then testing it in pilots or mini prototypes and then adjusting them. So the cycle for a responsive master schedule shouldn't ever stop. I know that in many cases, in my own experience in a comprehensive high school, the scheduling process starts with registration sometime in January or February, and then it runs through the computer cycles and then gets kind of fixed and iterated all the way up through June once you know your staffing, and then it's done again until January. That isn't necessarily the most responsive methodology to student needs. So I would counter that it might be something that you might want to think about as a constant cycle of iteration, so that you don't get into a point where you aren't able to meet the needs that students have because of the excuse is the schedule won't let me do it. So I'm hoping and prompting that you look at a responsive master schedule and look at iterations that happen over time. Okay, here's an example of a school that I worked with 2 years ago now, and what their schedule looked like when I started working with them. You'll notice that over on this side are teachers. I've actually changed the teachers, so those are made up names. They don't even make sense, some of them, but anyway, so it's made up names over on the left, and then the schedule itself goes across from period to period like a typical school would. There are 2 lunches in this iteration from 12:02 to 12:24 and then 12:48 to 1:10. As you can see in there are, this is a rural school, it's a fairly small school, but they have some nuances of their context that are maybe a little bit different than others. But you do see the majority of the typical coursework like geometry and biology and physics and et cetera. This is what most schools have. This is what most schools look like. They try to make sure that they're meeting the needs of their requests based on their program of studies. So if you look at this school, and I'm going to ask for you guys to talk with me a little bit, if you look at this school, what kinds of things jump out at you about the school? What is important to this school, and how is that importance reflected in the master schedule itself? So here's where I'm looking for you to give me some information about what you see when you look at the example. What does this master schedule tell you about this school?
It appears as though there are several times that are available for team meetings, content meetings. Looks like ancillary is happening, which allows teams of teachers maybe to meet.
I agree. What else can you tell is important to this school?
Channel 1.
Channel 1 is blocked out for the whole day, or I mean for the whole time frame for everybody. What else? What grade bands do you think are covered by this school?
High school.
Yep, 9 through 12, and if you look at Schwartz, there's also 7th and 8th grade, so it's 7 through 12. It's a 7 through 12 small school. Some of the things that you might also notice is that there are animal science, there are ag machines, there are different kinds of courses that are in pathways that they've implemented that end with some PSEO coursework. Some things that you might also notice is that when we're looking at this particular schedule, is there a lot of feedback for you when I talk?
Yes.
Is that better? Is there less feedback that way?
Yes.
So when we look at this particular school, it's important for them to move students through the day. and that they have some time for some collaborative instances for teachers. When we look at the school itself, what we found when we looked a little bit further is that students were put into a course and they stayed into that course for the entire year, whether they had mastery or not. They, if they took electives, at times they were unable to finish physics, as an example. They had a very low threshold of kids who took physics because they were taking other electives. We also found in this particular school that they valued the students' ability to make choices. So they had their program of studies and they opened it up for every single student, and you could pick whatever it is that you wanted to take, regardless of any prerequisite. And what they found is that students were pretty much taking what it is that they needed to take, but every once in a while, some kids would fall through the cracks. This is pretty typical to a small school in the greater Ohio area. This is also pretty typical for large schools. They just have a lot more teachers and a lot more courses available to them. In a responsive master schedule, what we would want to try to do is to empathize what does a day look like, feel like, and sound like for students? How do we develop a deep understanding of the challenges and what needs to be solved? So when we look at that schedule, what do you think students who know how to do school feel about their schedule? Or students who are academically talented, how do they feel about their schedule? How do students who struggle academically or socially feel about their schedule? In this particular case, we did a series of student surveys about the school day. It wasn't that we asked them, hey, tell us about the master schedule. We asked them questions about how they matriculated through the day. We asked them questions sometimes in the morning and sometimes in the afternoon from a survey perspective. It was quick and easy. They used their phones to do it. And in some cases, they used the devices that were available in the classroom. But what we asked them is, you know, what do you feel like when you go from class to class? We've heard things like, I feel like I'm shepherded from one place to another. I feel like nobody knows what happened to me in the last period when I get to the next period, so they don't understand why I'm happy or sad or upset or agitated. So those kinds of things came up. What is a really good idea when you're in the empathy stage, and this is something you can do periodically, it doesn't have to be a one-time event, is to check with the students and ask them questions about what is it that how do I feel about what I'm doing? How do I feel about moving from this class to that class? There's a hope and engagement survey that we also suggest when we're getting ready to think about the master schedule. From Gallup, it's free. It happens in October, but that also can indicate to you changes in students' perception of how engaged they are inside of the school. If you would like more information about any of that, just email me at the end of the webinar and I can give you that information. So during the empathy stage of looking at a schedule or the scheduling process, you want to really make sure that you're looking at the data that comes with what student groups are saying about how they feel about school. We also want to make sure that we don't, in the last slide I had a whole bunch of extra bubbles. It doesn't have to just be the big three. It could be demographic groups of children who are socioeconomically disadvantaged or students who are advantaged. You can break your demographics down however it is that you need to. These are the general ones that almost everybody uses, but it's really important to develop a deep understanding of how the students feel. It's also important to figure out how the teachers feel about what they're doing. This next example is a block schedule that one of the local schools here in Columbus is using. And in this particular schedule, I didn't put the teacher names in because we want to talk about how would a teacher feel if I taught period 1, and period 1 on Monday was from 7:55 to 8:50. Period 1 on Tuesday was 7:55 to 9:12. And then you don't meet the kids again until Thursday from 7:55 to 9:12. And then you go back to the more traditional time frame of 7:55 to 8:50. So what does that do for the teacher? How does the teacher feel about his or her movement across time with students? What's good about having the extended time on Tuesday and Thursday, and what's bad about that? What are some jeopardies that may occur because they're not meeting with the students on Wednesday? All of those are considerations during empathy that you want to make sure that you're monitoring. And remember, empathy isn't something that you're going to do only one time. It's something that should be a constant iteration over time. The next thing to think about for your master schedule is, what is the focus of your school as displayed through your master schedule? Is your master schedule adult focused? Is it learner focused? Is it facility focused? Generally, one of those three types will come through when you look at your master schedule. So here are some examples that I've encountered over the last 15 or 20 years working in administration for large and small schools. We tend to want to do what the system thinks is easier, not because we're trying to discount any group or any person, but because we think that it would be able to move students better in a shorter time. I don't know what that is. I'm sorry. Hi, Erica. Sorry about that. So when we look at adult focused, here are some characteristics. And when you get this PowerPoint, I typed out a whole bunch of things to think about in case you want to use this with other people with each slide. But when you look at adult focused environments and adult focused master schedule, those tend to be focused on things like contractual obligations, meaning that we don't try anything else because we want to make sure that we're meeting the minimum number of minutes for a teacher, and we want to make sure that we're following the guidelines for the number of preps for a teacher. So if that's primary for you, then you have an adult-focused master schedule. There's nothing bad or good about it. It's not one way or the other. It's just what the master schedule would tell you is that it's there to make sure that the adults are able to do what they need to do in the delivery process. A learner-focused schedule tends to be a little bit different. A learner-focused schedule looks at the nuances of how kids need to move throughout the curriculum and or throughout the day to best represent what they need to do in order to be able to move forward. So in a learner-focused environment, you see things like mastery thresholds or rescheduling after the first term, or you see that the formative assessments are embedded in the classroom experience. So a learner-focused schedule morphs more frequently than adult-focused schedules tend to morph, meaning that you can reschedule, or you may want to reschedule more frequently in a learner-focused scheduling process than you would in an adult-focused or rule-focused schedule. Then there's something that we see called a facility-focused master schedule. And that's where you have really tight quarters and really tight numbers of students per teacher available. And so you're collapsing settings, sorry about that. You're collapsing settings and systems to make sure that the facility maximizes its use. Another example is that if the band needs to meet and practice, they need to be able to meet and practice when there's no PE in the gym, as an example. So one way or another, one of these three usually is the primary focus for the way your master schedule is created. But we're all on the same boat. In the end, if we don't consider lots of different angles, we all end up sinking. So rather than being one at the end or the one that's Bailey, I would consider maybe looking at scheduling as an iterative process, something that is learner focused and something that meets the needs of the adults by meeting the needs of the students. Do you have any questions so far? This is a really quiet group. So what can we learn about the students from a data perspective so that we can define the challenge? So what I talk about next is a series of data and information pieces that I use, and I coach other principals and curriculum advisors to get the master schedule to a place where we can meet the needs of all of our students and not just the ones who can do school and are academically able. This is under the part of the scheduling process that we call definition. What are the essential components of the schedule that need to be included, that aren't included, or we're not serving students well? And what are the data indicators that you want to change? So I have some data for you to look at. This is just an example that I pulled off, but when you have different kinds of assessment systems, and everybody's got different ones, you have information that they give you that can help you when you're scheduling. In this particular case, I just picked NWEA map, and they give to every school the projected ACT readiness when taken in the spring. This particular school has 6th through 12th grade, and so they just started early on their early college matriculation. So when they look at what is happening for students, how many are on track, what are the percentage that are not on track, and what are the ones that are on track but could fall one way or the other. This information helps you to be able to decide what kinds of things to emphasize for students, both in large groups and in small groups. So the first question you might ask yourself, in this particular case, they have 43% on track for 24 and 15.5% on track for 22 and 41.3% not on track. So the first thing you would do when you're trying to define what the problem is you would look at that 41.3% and drill down to what courses are they taking. In this particular case, it was 6th grade, but it doesn't matter what grade it's in. You want to look at what is it that they're taking, and then what is it that the students are not getting in what they're taking, so that you don't exacerbate the problem by continuing them in a progression that doesn't mitigate the gap that they may be expressing. So what I mean there is that, let's say this was a 9th grade PI, and I'm looking at 41.3% of them not on track for 22 ACT. In an early college, that's a big concern. I want to make sure that I have the majority of my kids in the blue. But if I don't have that, and I have, the 41.3% not on track for the 22, then what I want to try to do is to say, let's take a look at what it is that they're taking. What do we have to interrupt in order for the gaps to close for that 41.3%? So I'm going to go on a little bit further and drill down. So I might look inside of a classroom, and here I'm going to look at the student data and the teacher's data for achievement versus growth. This is a scatter plot. It's available in STAR. It's available in NWEA map, but in this particular scatter plot of a group of students, it shows reading and math because this was a science teacher. And it shows where the students are with regard to achievement and to growth. Achievement goes across the bottom. Achievement goes across the bottom, and growth is going up the side. So achievement is the student's achievement versus all others who took that particular assessment at that particular time, at that particular grade level. And then growth is how did that student grow from one year to the next, from one assessment period to the next assessment period. In this case, it was a fall to spring assessment period. When I look at this and I look at what this teacher is, we use this at the beginning of the next year. When I look at what the teacher is looking at having to work with in their students, she had a lot of kids who were fairly high achievers, but she had some kids who were not. Some were high growth but low achievement, and some were low achievement and low growth. So when we look at the group of students, that are in this area, we're looking at students who have significant struggles. And their struggles aren't going to be mitigated if we don't take action for them. So when I look at scheduling a group of students, I may need to hand schedule those students into a setting that would enable more interaction or more assistance. In this particular class, it wasn't set up to have intervention, but we did need to serve these students. So I had to figure out from a scheduling perspective how to include the students who had not been identified in special needs or ELL, how we can get additional help for them. So it looks like we're having some trouble. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. The video went away, but I can hear you.
Okay. Can you see the video now?
No, again, I can see the presentation and your pen moving, but I can't actually see. I do see the presentation. It is on, and I see your pen moving around the screen.
Okay, that'll be good enough. If that's okay with you guys, we'll just leave it off. So I'm not sure where the audio went out. Was that Rhonda?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Where did the audio stop?
I see you were talking about the low achievement and low growth students, ways in which you need to kind of maybe do a hand schedule for them in order to get them the intervention they need.
Awesome. So when I look at another teacher, just as an example to go a little bit further, and I'm looking at the overall, you know what, a master schedule is a group of schedules all put together to get an outcome. And so if we look at it from an individual student standpoint, so I had my first scheduling experience was at the comprehensive high school as the principal, and I had 1,800 students. When I started my STEM early college high school, I was down to 450 students. There was a significant difference in my ability to think about how to schedule between those two experiences. So when I went back to my 1,800 student high school, I needed to keep those principles of what is happening for the students at the forefront so I could define what it is that we needed to do for each student. So when I look at this particular teacher at the beginning of the school year, she's a English language arts teacher in the 9th grade. So her students are kind of all over the map. Over here we have students who are in the low achievement, low growth range. Over here we have students that are in the higher achievement but low growth. Up here we have students who are closing gaps, higher growth, but not yet achieving where we need them to achieve. And here we have the high achievement, high growth. So what we want to try to do when we schedule is to say, what can a teacher do with students with regard to differentiation? What can the system provide for the students with regard to intervention services? If the gaps are really large and the disbursement of growth and achievement is really vast, it becomes very difficult for the teacher to be able to differentiate for the need of the student. So what we ended up trying to do with this particular school is we started to schedule students that had ranges of achievement and growth that were similar. Our reports come back and it tells us how teachers do with regard to growth in quintiles. So we know that for teacher A, they might have had a high degree of success with kids in the highest quintile, or they may have had a high degree of success with kids in the lowest quintile. And if we look at that data as a trend over time, then we're much better able to match the teacher with the student in order to produce maximum growth. Now it's tricky because your first affinity might be to say, okay, let's match all of the kids in the first quintile, low achieving low growth with the teacher who does the best with the low achieving and low growth. And that would be true, but you don't want to track students where you have no peer interaction for a difference among students. So what we found to be helpful is to take students that are in quadrants together with other quadrants. So for instance, here we have students who have been closing gaps. I didn't mean to not count this little one, but they're closing gaps, but they're not yet achieving. These kids are achieving, but they're not showing growth. This would be a good match for a classroom. Because if we're looking at what can the teacher do to intervene on behalf of his or her students, in this particular case, you have students who tend to be more eager to learn, with students who are a little bit more reluctant to learn, but who are able. So you're looking at matching students for scheduling in a way that would promote the optimal performance from them. Another way to think about it, and I'll change the pen color. Maybe I won't. Another way to look at it would be from this side to this side. Sorry, I couldn't change the pen color there. So if we're looking at students who are lower in the growth threshold versus students that are higher in the growth threshold, and a teacher who happens to grow students well in lots of different quintiles, that teacher could handle a wide disbursement. So now I'm being very specific about matching students to the teacher and what the teacher is really good at doing. So if a teacher, and I had a few of these, if a teacher is good at growth across all quintiles. My last teacher was Ben Wagner, and he was an Algebra 2 teacher, And he could grow kids in any of the quintiles, any of them. So for him, when we're looking at scheduling, we schedule kids who had a low threshold of growth, but across all of the achievement levels, because we knew he could maximize their growth, and in fact he did. They ended up with high achievement, high growth. So because he was really good at getting growth, he was able to move them further and close gaps better than if we just randomly dispersed the students throughout the school to all of the Algebra 2 teachers. So I'm going to pause here and ask for questions. Do any of you have this kind of available to you? Growth and achievement?
This appears to be kind of typical of what you see.
Do you have this kind of data available to you?
Yes, we use NWEA as well.
And so you can see what the teacher growth ratings, you can see how they do it year to year.
Yes.
So this would be one way to use the data to help to conceptually frame the placement of students into courses to better promote their growth. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so to keep going further, you want to look at how the students are performing at the end of the year and getting ready to schedule them, or you could do it mid-year. Getting ready to schedule them, you want to match the students to optimize their performance with the teacher based on how the teachers are handling the growth or achievement for students. When we look at defining the scheduling parameters, that's what I was just doing when I was talking about the student data. You want to decide what range is appropriate for instruction. So for instance, if a teacher has students that are all over the map, it's really difficult to serve every student and close gaps sufficiently for them to be able to circulate to the next course. So decide what range is appropriate for instruction, meaning that you want to have a fairly heterogeneous grouping, but you don't want to have it so heterogeneous that the teacher can't differentiate their responses. Look for trends in student requests. If I go back to this summary report and I look at the 41.3% of the students, if I look at the 41.3% of the students, what are they taking? How are they performing inside of what they're taking? Have they been referred in large measure for RTI, or is it silent? Sometimes I find that the kids who have the hardest gaps to close are the kids who perform in a CD range and they don't cause any trouble. They're quiet in class or they're respectful in class, but they just never quite get what it is that they're supposed to learn in order to be able to move forward. So make sure you're checking for what it is that they've taken and what trends are available for them. We know that kids can't handle 2 bad years in a row, so we want to make sure that we try to make sure that the schedule is reflective of the best opportunity for learning for that student and for those students. Match the need of the student to the best instructors based on performance data for both the strength of the teacher to grow students and the need of the student. And don't be afraid to hand schedule where needed. So before I had talked about the master schedule as a compilation of all of the individual student performances, or all the student schedules. In an adult-focused master scheduling process, we tend to rely on the computer to schedule the students with the least number of conflicts. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But if that's the only parameter that you're using for scheduling, it tends to be an adult-focused or a facilities-focused schedule, not a student-driven schedule. When we look at basing the student needs or the student outcomes as the primary construct for how we deliver the schedule, we make better choices about what it is that students are able to accomplish over the course of the year. So if we look at the survey results, hopefully this works. When we looked at the scheduling for performance survey, and then we look at the results, can everybody see them?
No, they didn't come up.
Okay. I'm going to describe them and then I'll send them to you so you can see the results. But the questions were driven in 3 different segments. The first segment was about looking at students and the matriculation through coursework. And so what you want to do when you're figuring out and defining what it is that you want to accomplish through your schedule, you want to make sure that the priorities are very clear. So ask yourself questions similar to what we had in that particular survey, where you prioritize what you want to have happen as a result of the scheduling process. Then you have a better chance of actually meeting the needs of more students because you're prioritizing what you want to have happen. So for instance, of all of the things that are on there, if it was really important for you in the student support section for the students to have access to ACT and SAT remediation, then the schedule should have the opportunity for students to be able to do that. If it isn't important to you and you want to embed, or you want to embed it inside of your classes in your curriculum, then you make it a priority in the curriculum development. But if these things are important to you, especially in an early college setting, you want to make sure you push that out in front of your design process. That way, you have a better chance of being able to schedule the students into an opportunity versus scheduling them into a class. So let's talk about some of the things that you have. I've heard Rick and I've heard Rhonda. I haven't heard anybody else on the line yet. Rhonda, what kinds of things are you thinking about right now where you are?
I'm at a STEM designated school. It's a small, we are actually K through 11 this year. We don't have any seniors. However, we've entered into a contract with the community college to do some dual credit type courses. The problem is that our students are taking, I'm in Texas, so they have to take the Texas initiative. And our students are having difficulty passing that in order to qualify for the dual credit courses.
Is that the placement system that they use for taking college credit?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It also, they don't need the ACT or SAT for the dual credit, but they actually have to meet a standard for in the Texas State Initiative exam in order to even qualify to take these courses. So it's not basically used for placement, but it qualifies them even entrance.
Okay. And
I'm convinced they're not being successful. So what I'm looking at is going back to my 8th graders. This year I tried placing them all in biology and Algebra 1, which normally begins at 9th grade. So I've kind of moved them up, hoping that the math would get them ready, and then they have both a reading and a writing for English language arts. We don't participate in core here in Texas.
okay. I am familiar with the Early College Initiative. I worked with them about 4 years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay, so what I'm finding, though, I'm hoping that that will help kind of ahead of time for our 8th graders. We want them to start taking these college dual credit at 9th grade, summer after completion of 9th grade.
Do they have assessments that they, I mean, when do the assessments start, and are they course-specific assessments that they have to take?
They have to take English. It's a writing, so it's an English reading and a writing. It is a math exam as well. I'm not too particular about the science because of our agreement with UT. We have an agreement with them, so they come in and they give us the science. But I'm really interested in getting these dual credits in the English and the mathematics.
And so from a qualification standpoint, you are hopeful that they qualify at the end of 8th grade for English?
Or at least by December of the 9th grade. So, you know, our 8th graders, this is the first time we've kind of backed up the mathematics, the Algebra 1 and the biology 8th grade. Okay. And they take, again, an English reading and a writing, which are 2 separate classes. Hopefully that will prepare them to master the TSI exam, you know, either during next summer or the first semester of 9th grade.
Are they allowed to take that exam twice a year?
Yes.
And when the student sits for it the first time, do you have any threshold of, you said you had NWEA math. Do you have any NWEA math score thresholds before they sit the first time?
Yeah, we do a pre-test. We have brought our 8th graders in the first part of August and did a pre-test to see who, you know, kind of give us an idea of who was ready even for the algebra. And we do like a release 8 test for the English, and we do a release test for the mathematics for algebra. So we pre-test them. And then the community college has also given us sample TSI exams that we can use as well. So we pre-test them just for entrance into the courses, although this year we pre-tested them really to get an idea of where they were coming out of 7th grade going into 8th grade as far as the math and the reading, writing.
And how long is the reading class and how long is the writing class in the current schedule?
Right now it is 65 minutes, so it's an hour and 5 minutes every day.
For reading and writing, correct?
Right, they have a separate reading class and a separate writing class, yes.
And then for math, how long do they have in a day for math?
Again, 65 minutes for the mathematics. And they all take Algebra 1. Okay. I hired additional staff, so the classes wouldn't be as large. The student-teacher ratio is kind of low. So I brought that back. I did that so teachers can spend time with the students in offering, you know, interventions in the class and things like that.
Do the teachers utilize the learning continuum from NWEA MAP?
Yes, they have access and they use that as well. We do assessment. Go ahead.
Are they targeting performance to the college access RIT score?
Yes, they are.
Do you find in this particular iteration, so if you take this as the cohort moving forward, do you have you found that have you done the mid-year NWEA?
We have that scheduled for next week.
It would be interesting to see if this iteration has made a difference for the performance of the students.
Yeah, the other thing we did, since we're starting with 8th grade, so let me talk about my 9th graders and my 10th graders who tested and didn't qualify. What we did was we just kind of provided them with some intervention. We have some 10th graders who retested in October, and we'll begin based on those interventions. We had them come in throughout the summer as well, because now we're trying to catch up with these 10th graders. We only have about 10, 11th graders. Again, we're a small charter. We only have 10, 11th graders. So, you know, we sent them to the community college to receive their intervention there, and they have done well. They went in the summer. So those students now are taking dual credit courses. However, they're only restricted to 1 3-hour math class. They're really struggling with the reading and writing.
Is your school a year-round school?
No, we are not.
Is your school a mastery school?
I'm not sure. Can you kind of define what that means?
Sure. Some early college schools have moved to mastery, which means that the student needs to perform on standards a certain percentage of time. I'll give you an example that was my school. My students were required in reading and math to perform against the standards for that class 90% of the time in order to pass the class. And then they passed it with an A. So they either had an A or they were work in progress.
Wow, okay. No, we did not apply in the state of Texas to be early college. Our superintendent did not favor early college versus allowing or making a commitment to parents that those students who start with us at 8th grade would end up with 18 college hours if they remained at the school throughout their senior year. They graduated 12th grade. We committed to providing those students with a minimum of 18 college credit hours. So we're not a early college high school. Here in Texas, that means that they graduate with a high school diploma and a associate's degree. Right. Okay. So we didn't do that for that reason. Then another reason was it kind of a social life was also deemed very important for students. And in early college here in Texas, there are no social activities. There are no athletics. There's no band, fine arts, or anything like that.
Okay. So from a priority standpoint, what I'm hearing is that there's a priority for a concentration on reading and math because that's your deficit area for your older kids.
Right.
That you've covered that for the 8th grade in math by putting them in, exposing them to algebra early.
Yes.
The classes are your classes around, so that 1 year time, 1 year class, or 1 credit class?
Yes.
Have you ever looked at students to be able to matriculate faster or slower than 1 year?
I haven't. That's not something that we have discussed. I've heard of virtual campuses doing that, but as far as teacher lectured or teacher taught courses, we have not.
So what I'm hearing from a priority standpoint is a priority for reading and writing for the older students. How long is their period?
The high school period runs 75 minutes.
Is there a possibility to move the high school to the 105-minute threshold?
I would have to put that, I'm just thinking quickly, how many classes we could get in a day. That's the other thing. 105 would put us sort of on a block type schedule.
So
That's a possibility, though. That might be something that we can. I was looking at your other master schedule that you had up earlier.
Yes.
And I know that here for our CTE courses, where students have to have so many clock hours in like a computer type course, or you know, for career technology education, even for our STEM classes, where physics, that's part of our STEM scope here at this school. We're doing health. So, you know, our track for STEM is kind of health, a health track. And I know even in the STEM, you know, for T-STEM in Texas, they have to have so many clock hours in those STEM-based courses.
So are students in your school generally in course 6.5 hours?
Yes.
Like generally?
Yes.
So if you did 490s, you would beat the Carnegie unit clock hour for a semester.
Okay, because, okay,
And then you'd have a skinny that's like 40 minutes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
And if I can work with you on this again a little bit later, but I'm hearing that you need a little bit more emphasis, which also sometimes equates to time, for the older kids to be able to get to where you want them to go. It may be mitigated with your 8th graders, but it doesn't solve the problem for your current 9th graders and
right.
graders.
Right. And a lot of the focus for my 9th graders, I mean, you know, we're trying to be clever in the way we do intervention along in that particular class period. You know, so the teacher is trying to use a part of that class period to provide intervention and work with them on techniques to improve their skills as far as test-taking skills, and going back and reviewing some of the objectives that they need to know in order to be successful on the TSI exam.
So if you could think about a priority for the time that you want, and then the schedule could work for the student if they achieved all of the outcomes that you wanted in a course by semester, then they would go on or take a college course. And the students who didn't would pass for the remainder of the year. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So then you could mitigate, even if you only do it for math and English at the high school, and then the rest of it was in 45-minute periods or however long you wanted them.
you could probably make a difference in a very short time frame for all of them.
Okay. Okay.
Rick, you've been quiet. What is going on at your school? I see Becky's on. Becky?
I wanted to ask a question. How did you, when you're looking at your scheduling, how does this affect your inclusion students? What do you do for them?
So if you're fully included and you look back at your groupings, so if you're fully included, I would, as an example, let's say that this, and I know this to be true, let's say that this is an ELL student and these are students who've been identified and have an IEP. If I'm looking at them inside of this class and I'm looking at inclusion, then I'm going to have to make a scheduling choice, like a priority choice when I'm scheduling to, that's 4 students out of probably 25. So in that, I'm going to have to either have them have access to an intervention specialist who can work with them outside of the class, or I'm going to have to schedule this class so that the majority of the students have similar needs. So as the former example, all of the kids who need to have need growth as a characteristic of their academic performance. So if they are low growth, I'm going to put them with a high growth teacher regardless of where they are on the achievement, and then be able to move them forward. I tend to need less intervention services when I've scheduled for students with a match with a teacher who has expertise in that particular area. Does that make sense, Rhonda?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And then your ELL students, I mean, I know that there should be some type of strategy, anyway, that's being used in the classroom to help not just your ELL, but also your IEP students.
Correct. And what I was able to do, is to do more inclusion actually and less pullout for students by matching the teachers to the teacher performance to the student performance and need. We needed less pullout when that happened, so that allowed my intervention specialists to be able to help the teachers in the regular classroom more. So the first year that we did it, we kept everything the same number of resource classrooms, the same everything. The second year that we did this, we didn't need as many resource rooms because it started to be written out of some of the IEPs and more inclusion was needed. And then by the end of the 5th year of doing scheduling this way, we ended up with the majority of the students fully included with, I think we were at 30% less resource rooms at that point. So it did mean I needed less people. Their jobs changed because the kids were able to achieve at higher rates as they're getting ready for their college coursework. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Of course, that's based on having the same teacher you had at your school who was able to really move them, grow them.
I found that teachers ended up wanting to stay more. Now, in my STEM school, the teachers wanted to stay in the STEM school anyway. In my comprehensive high school, I had teachers moving in and out all over the place until we started to get some you know, when I'm going to be blunt about how I'm saying this, but when when students start performing better and they start achieving more, people feel like they made a difference in it, and they tend to stay more than they do when I was in a comprehensive high school where we didn't do this. So Rhonda and Rick and Becky, for prototyping, you can prototype during the school year by allowing teachers to create scheduling instances that are a little bit different. I did this in 2 different ways in 2 different settings. I'll describe the first one. We felt like the students needed more help in math. So our problem was the opposite of what you described, Rhonda. Our kids were not matriculating into college coursework in mathematics the way that they should. And so because they weren't matriculating into mathematics, we took a step back. We looked at what it was, how the kids were feeling. They were feeling like they weren't able to do the work and they were afraid of math when we did some of that exploration. The second thing that we found in that particular setting is that the students felt like the teachers didn't care if they learned math or if they didn't learn math. And so those kinds of things help to inform us about what we should be doing. We started having math teachers move with the students so that the performance of the students and the performance of the teacher were with one another, and they essentially looped like you do in elementary school, but they looped with the kids in 2-year patterns. What it did 2 things for us. One, it allowed us to prototype the matching of teachers and students. The second thing it allowed us to do is during the school year, the teachers in the loop could negotiate, so to speak, with the rest of their teachers to say, I need more time this week for students to be able to do a formative assessment practice, or I need more time. And so those things were encouraged as prototypes. What we ended up doing then the year following is extending the amount of time on math to a block for all students. And so the teachers that were teaching math had the students a little bit longer than everybody else did on a typical period. We got big changes in closure and gaps because we did that, but it only happened because we prototyped it during the school year to be able to have the confidence that it could work. So don't be afraid to prototype even during the school year if you need to. Make sure that when you're doing your work that you're doing it with a 4-year plan, so that, and Rhonda, your description is perfect. When you're looking at the 4-year plan, how are you going to get them to the place where they can do what you need them to do in order to be able to move forward? This is a more generic one because I was just working with a comprehensive high school that's not in early college, and this is what we came up with for them. And if you look over to the right where it says advisory, it's starting to indicate that the parameters for the scheduling process need to include self-regulation, self-monitoring, reflection, career advising, college advising. So because we needed to include those things, they were then a focus or priority in what they were thinking about for their scheduling. So this is the time for me to help you further with anything that you have questions about. Any individual that needs help, I can help you if you just give me a little bit of an idea of what you want or where you want to go.
I'm going to ask, I see, like on that prior schedule you showed us, they were watching TV One or that little block of time. Is that just for like their announcements, attendance, things like that?
Yeah, so Channel 1 is a program that you can get on the TVs, and you can add your announcements to it, and they took attendance at that time. What they were also finding, and one of the things that we changed pretty rapidly, is that was the only time they were taking attendance in the day, and it was not accurate. So there were a couple other problems that were occurring in that particular instance.
Okay.
What other
an issue as well?
What other kinds of things are you interested in?
I think with the information that you gave, did you say you were going to send us that PowerPoint?
I am, and I annotated it, so you'll have a whole bunch of information, and we also recorded this.
Oh, okay, okay.
Well, if there are any other questions, then I guess we can a little bit early, and you can begin your evening with your family.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure, is that Rick?
Yes.
Hey, Rick, is there anything I can help you with?
Well, we have designed a 4-year plan already for all of our students. We are a standalone. And, you know, slowly but surely we've been incorporating different courses with the Austin Community College here. And so that the students not only can get a liberal arts associate's, but if they want to pursue a science one, they're able to do the associate's in science. I think that with our school, what our students struggle with a lot is the social structure more than the academic. There is so much academic here that sometimes they feel burned out.
So are you in need of maybe some advising time or some community time?
Right. Exactly.
How is your current period schedule arranged?
We are in a block schedule where they actually have, well, now 10 periods to where the first period is a college advisory. For the freshmen, it's their PE class, and then four classes after that. The freshmen have a tutorial time built into their schedule, and also a TSI. They have to pass a TSI in order to be able to take their first college course in January as freshmen. And so after that, you know, our sophomores, there is no more tutorial time for them. It's 2 college courses and 4 core classes.
Are they
very
matriculating pretty well?
Some of them struggle. You know, sometimes they feel that the workload is harder, or there's more work here in the high school than there is in the college.
And that's from the preparation schedule?
Yes. In order for them to be able to meet their core classes and to be able to, because they have to graduate high school. So, you know, they have to meet the requirements for high school graduation.
Is there any capacity for the college coursework to count as the high school credit?
Yes, no, they're dual credits. They're dual, but you know, it's to where I guess that there's a lot of work, and they claim they're staying up very late, you know, just trying to finish up the classwork.
So from a day-to-day schedule, if the students are matriculating pretty well, is there a possibility that you could reduce the number of minutes in the high school portion of the coursework to add in more reflective and or social time?
Well, that's a thought, and that's something that I need to bring up with the principal.
It looks like Caesar's trying to talk. Caesar, I can't hear you.
No, I'm not trying to talk. I don't know how I got unmuted. Nope.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Rick.
No, not a problem. Yeah, I would have to discuss it with him since he does the master schedule.
So if you need information or if you want to think about ways to get that done, you have my email. You can just email me and I can help you.
Sure, thank you.
Well, Caesar, I think that we're complete.
Well, we want to thank everyone. I sent everyone an invite to the community of practice. So this webinar will be on there, recorded, and additional materials. And also, Marcy's sending out the materials to you. But there's tons of materials on the community of practice website. So feel free to visit. Marcy is also doing a presentation next Monday around the same time, right, Marcy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what was the topic, Marcy?
Next week, oh, I just went blank here. It's another data session working on closing gaps inside the classroom.
Next Monday, yes.
Okay, I'm already signed up for that one.
Okay, great, great. Well, get some more of your colleagues, just forward the invitation to them, and we'll be more than happy to host you guys. Okay, Marcy.
Thank you. Yes, I'm signed up for that one as well.
Great.
Yay!
Great. All right. Marcy, you have any last words you want to convey?
I thank everybody. I learn as much whenever we're talking about things as any of you might learn. So if I can help in any way, just let me know. But thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening.
You too. Thanks.
Bye-bye.